close. Then sometimes we're going to give them laptops because the new technology is the future, but you are not taking care of the present, and you cannot have a tomorrow without today. So cleanliness, neatness, that this should function. And then this will encourage the faculty also to work better, to be at home, to be pleasant. And it's something that changes the way of doing things. There was a study, which I can't quote because I don't have it at hand now, but it was done in several metro systems in the world. And the conclusion was that even if the city was dirty, when you keep the metro clean, people, as soon as they enter the station, they change their way of behaving. Then I will not throw the paper on the floor. Maybe that's what I did yesterday. I was laughing to myself because as I was being driven from Mumbai to Pune, the driver opened the door of the car like 120 times to speed outside. And then I was saying, well, maybe it's common, it's something he was chewing something that you have to speed. But certainly, if the place is clean, spotless, like this room, of course no one will be speeding, because you change the mentality, hopefully. You change the mentality. So, and these two things, infrastructure and faculty, together, pleasant, working in an environment that is conducive, preach the values we want to transmit to the students. So, for as long as universities try to maximize profit, meaning keep it as a shop, dirty and kept because you want to squeeze as much as you can from the fees of the students, values will never be given. No matter how much we preach them, how beautiful the mission and vision is, it will not happen. So values, faculty and infrastructure are deeply interrelated. If we want to teach values, we have to preach them, but not with words, but with deeds, and that's go much closer. And certainly, this will also enhance all these aspects we have been speaking about here. The mobility of students will become possible because you share those common values that were put down in that beautiful Singapore Declaration and the Madrid Protocol. Can we succeed? Will we succeed? Well, we cannot guarantee success, but we guarantee failure by giving up. Thank you.
Good morning. We'll get you there. Between the two of us, we'll get everybody there. I took one of the first picks for topic, looking at the Singapore Declaration, and I chose curriculum, a matter that's near and dear to my heart, and has been over the last 5 years. And then I realized that Dr. Menon would be our co-president, and talking about curriculum reform in front of Dr. Menon is a bit like lecturing the Dalai Lama on religion and tranquility. So suddenly the stakes have been increased a bit. Another map. My name is Michael Pyle. I'm the Vice Dean of Jigme Singye Wangchuk School of Law, the first and only law school in the Kingdom of Bhutan. Pune is a suburb of Bhutan. Right there, we have two neighbors, Tibet to the north and West Bengal to the south. Bhutan is one of the few countries in the world that can claim never to have been colonized, never been conquered. Modern Bhutan was established in 1907 by His Majesty Bugin Wangchu, the first king of Bhutan, and founder of an absolute monarchy that lasted for more than 100 years. His great-grandson, Jigme Singye Wangchuk, after whom my law school is named, fundamentally altered the monarchy and Bhutan's destiny and my own career in two important ways. First, in the 1980s, he invented the concept of gross national happiness, or GNH, a development strategy that guides Bhutan's central economic, social, and political planning to this day. GNH was established by His Majesty upon four pillars: sustainable and equitable socio-economic development, environmental conservation, preservation and promotion of culture, and good governance. Every public policy in Bhutan is measured against these four pillars in a fascinating political and policy process that ensures that Bhutan's development is guided by these goals, which are often set aside as economic externalities in other economic systems. Secondly, In 2001, His Majesty the Great Fourth King announced that Bhutan would no longer be an absolute monarchy. He established a blue ribbon panel of judges, political and social notables, and religious and cultural leaders, and instructed them to draft a constitution that reflected Bhutanese tradition and values. In his mind, absolute monarchy was simply inconsistent with gross national happiness. In order to be truly happy, a people must have political self-governance. His son, Jigme Khesar Namgyal Wangchu, ascended to the throne in 2006 and in 2008 became Bhutan's first constitutional monarch. And in 2009, he announced that in support of the new democratic institutions, Bhutan would need its first law school. You see, up till then, all judges and lawyers in Bhutan, and there were fewer than 200, if you can imagine that, were trained abroad, usually here in India, and in fact, many of them here in Pune. His Majesty reasoned that in a democratic Bhutan, there was an urgent need for judges and lawyers who were immersed in Bhutanese law, Bhutanese values, to serve not only as legal advisors, but to act as legals and guardians of Bhutan's independence and sovereignty and of gross national happiness. So I joined the law school project in 2013 from Washington University in St. Louis, which gets 2 plugs on the panel, and I was given the enviable assignment of designing a curriculum for the law school. Now you hear about the metaphorical blank slate, but when this assignment was handed down, I was literally handed a blank sheet of paper. We were the first law school in Bhutan, but more than that, we were being established in a country that had less than 5 years of democratic experience. We had no guidance from the throne as to whether the curriculum we were developing was going to be undergraduate level, graduate level, in service, or whatever. We weren't told how long the course would be, and we weren't instructed in any sense as to what we should teach. Our instructions were, create a law school. So we got to work. We proceeded on 2 fronts. First, we surveyed what had already been done. Because Bhutanese lawyers were most familiar with the Indian legal education system, we drew upon the Rules of Legal Education 2008 of the Bar Council of India, and in particular, how those rules have been implemented by the top Indian law schools. We added to that curriculum models from some of the top law schools in other jurisdictions, in particular, Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Singapore, the United Kingdom, and the United States. We established a panel including representatives from the Supreme Court, the Office of the Attorney General, the monastic bodies, the government, and the civil service to review the commonalities and differences among these systems, and then we reached out to curriculum experts from each of these jurisdictions, asking them questions. Why did you do it this way? Why not this other way? How would you do it differently if you could start over? Which is exactly what we were doing. Secondly, we talked to the Bhutanese people. Fortunately, Bhutan is a very small country with less than 800,000 people and an extremely small legal profession. As I said, fewer than 200 lawyers and judges at the time. So we talked to the entire legal profession, as well as other key stakeholders, business people, political and religious leaders, NGOs, representatives of the urban and rural communities. And these interviews took many forms, but in the end, what we were asking them boiled down to what is it that Bhutanese lawyers need to know? And then, in the middle of this process, the International Association of Law Schools steps in. I had the good fortune to attend the inaugural 2013 Global Law Deans Forum in Singapore, and our school has followed the progress of the Singapore Declaration and the Madrid Protocol and their progeny closely. We were delighted to see that in Section 4, the IALS had more or less endorsed the methodology we had adopted. Section 4, as you see, requires that a law curriculum be in conformity with local criteria and policies, we talk to the people, but also informed by domestic and international norms. And Section 4 refers us to the global standards for outcomes. This in turn sets an excellent foundation for a curriculum divided into 3 parts: knowledge, skills, and values. There is, to be frank, nothing we disagree with in this document. And so the Singapore Declaration became part of our goals. Over the course of this national and international consultation, several conclusions emerged. The curriculum must reflect gross national happiness without question. We are a Bhutanese law school. This came in from all comers, national and foreign. It must also reflect other fundamental Bhutanese values. These include a strong traditional preference for mediation rather than litigation, and a recognition drawn from Bhutan's Buddhist and Buddhist religious roots of the fundamental interrelation of human society and our natural environment. We would also focus on the needs of Bhutanese state and society. If Bhutan doesn't need a labor and employment course, neither do we. Yet. And finally, in a tiny legal profession, we don't have enough lawyers to simply teach them book learning and throw them out to the legal profession to be trained up. We had to have them, a phrase that caught fire in the United States just when I left the US, we had to have them practice ready. And in Bhutan, we had to have them of necessity practice ready because there was no one to train them. Time is short, so I'll cut to the chase. We settled on a 5-year undergraduate model. To reflect Bhutanese values, the first 5 semesters contain a thorough grounding in Bhutan's national language, Dzongkha, as well as Bhutan's history and legal history and Buddhist philosophy. Now note, there aren't any legal textbooks out there yet in Dzongkha. Indeed, Bhutan is still in the process of evolving a legal Dzongkha lexicon. So most of our other courses are taught at least partly in English. Our focus on creating practice-ready lawyers led us to a healthy dose of legal research, writing, and oral advocacy in both English and Dzongkha, as well as negotiation, mediation, and arbitration, all compulsory for all students. These are semester schedules, by the way, 15-week semesters. Our dedication to gross national happiness means that in each of their first 4 years of studies, the students are required to take at least one course, Human Dignity, Environmental Law, Law, Culture, and Religion, which in an interdisciplinary way explores the interplay between G&H and the law and inculcates a respect for the nation's development ideology in the entire legal profession. Armed with our interviews with Bhutan's legal profession and society, we were able to plug in the doctrinal courses with a heavy comparative slant born of necessity. This is based on what we believe Bhutan needs. As the only law school, we maintain a great deal of flexibility to adjust this over the years, and we have a built-in mechanism whereby each year we meet with the legal sector to adjust this curriculum. And then we close it out with economics, philosophy, and political science. This is drawn in part from the Indian model, that you're just not a complete lawyer if you don't have a grounding in these things. Remember that our students are undergraduates. And then in the 4th and 5th years, the 4th year we've already talked a lot about, but the 4th and 5th years you learn by doing. We have a compulsory 1-year clinical requirement. Full stop. All students will participate in either a human dignity, entrepreneurship, or mediation clinic, where they will be working with live clients. They will be in court. They will be in mediations. This is drawn from the American model of clinical legal education and from our colleagues at Gage. And then in their 10th semester, we send them away. They will leave campus for a 15-week or more internship, either with a Bhutanese or a foreign institution, to get the training that we can't give them as a tiny, tiny law school. So, we opened our doors in July. The first law school in the Kingdom of Bhutan admitted 13 young women and 12 young men from across the country. They are starting examinations in about 48 hours. I'm here, thankfully. And once again, IALS is right where we need it to be. We are now exiting the development stage, and now we are looking at evaluation, accreditation, all of this good stuff. We're reflecting on what we've done, seeing how to modify it, and so we are pleased to see at the very same time that IALS is prepared to move into this realm as well. I look forward to the conversation in the next session, and I think I'll stop it at that.
So I want to thank all 5 of our panelists. They've given us a lot of food for thought, and they did so within the time constraints that I laid out for them, which I have never seen before from a panel of law school deans, so they are really to be applauded for doing that. So I don't know whether we'll have time for questions or not. We have a group photo 5 minutes. So if anyone has any questions or comments that have been sparked by any one of the panelists, please raise your hand. I'm sure somebody will bring you a microphone. Yes. Are microphones going around? Or if not, we'll just have to stand up and talk loudly.
Professor N.K. Chakraborty, I have one question issues with Professor Luis. You have mentioned interdisciplinary concept, but I think it should be multidisciplinary. If I take example of my experience in my subject of forensic science and evidence, there we can't say only for inter. It involves biology, it involves applied science, it involves medical science. So better term we think multidisciplinary.
Thank you. I'm Magina Almin from the University of Cape Town. I want to thank all the panelists for very interesting and insightful presentations. I have a very quick question for the Vice Dean from Bhutan Law School. Thank you very much. That was very, very informative. But I'm curious to know, in thinking through or identifying the jurisdictions to assist in developing the curriculum, why did you not include any law schools from Africa or any of the other Asian countries except for India?
I just have a quick question for Professor George Williams. Particularly interested in your embrace of technology and artificial intelligence and so on. The simple question I have is, how did you get the faculty, the academic staff, to agree to be innovative, or did you have to bring in other people to teach and leave the faculty to do what they, the standard courses? Thank you.
So why don't we give Michael a chance to answer the question first that was asked of him, and then.
There are only 24 hours in the day. We did look at the other curricula that were available online, and at meetings like this, and at meetings at the American Society of International Law and others. I certainly pulled as many curricula as we could, but with this sort of blue ribbon panel we had that was doing curriculum review, they really, given that everybody had an Indian legal education, India was really the thing that they were going to pivot from, and so they wanted to know, give us some examples, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the United States, Singapore, of places that do it differently, show us how, and then let's dig into the whys. So if I had it to do over again, and especially now that so much more information is available online, I think we would have done a much broader survey, and books have been written on this stuff now, which we didn't have 4 or 5 years ago.
Thanks very much, Penny, and you're right, change presents challenges, and there's often a lot of resistance from people who just like the things the way they are. And what we did at UNSW Law is firstly began a process, what we call the mini curriculum review, which was a very broad consultation, which is almost as much as anything about educating academic staff. And when people saw what was happening, I think increasingly they realised that it's not possible not to change, because if you do simply resist change, then it's going to have big costs for our students. What we've also done is really had big champions within the faculty. We've got one person, Larry Bennett-Moses, who's a mathematician and lawyer who has been leading a lot of these initiatives and is someone who's been speaking directly and educating staff as well. But I think probably the most powerful thing often is the students. The fact is the students are often well ahead of where we are as academics. And it was our own students who brought hackathons and all sorts of things. And they have been very critical of us as a faculty and saying, well, why aren't you doing more? So I think with that pressure from the students, it made it impossible for people to say things are good enough. And that combination of factors has enabled us to move forward, not without problems, but with broad support for change.
We have time for maybe one more question or comment? Yes.
My name is Manny Reddy. I'm from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, which is in South Africa. My question is directed to the gentlemen who come from areas where you may have been colonized previously. The question is this: you've talked about curriculum reform, but I haven't heard any mention of whether part of the curriculum reform involves decolonization of the legal education curriculum in your various areas. If you could just briefly comment on that, please.
Should I? That's a huge discussion in Africa. And I know there was a very interesting meeting recently about the colonization of legal education in South Africa. You know, it's happening, but I think everything has a time. There are still very few textbooks in Africa written by African authors. For example, if we look at East Africa, everything we do on family law, constitutional law, not so much now, but family law, tort, contract law is referring to books from England. Judges are being more innovative, and I think they are going now towards actually India, countries like Colombia, continental Europe, and looking for jurisprudence outside the traditional Commonwealth countries. So it's happening, and I think it perhaps will be the next generation, the generation that is now in law schools, that will finally achieve that decolonization, so to speak. But it's...
Thank you very much for the question, Manike. This is an extremely important question that you have asked, especially in our context. As you know, 2 years ago, there was a call by students after long protests for education, including legal education, to be decolonized. And it said that we didn't take the initiative, it was the students who had to prompt us. And from our context, we've been very active as part of South African Law Deans Association. Last week, actually, we had a big conference on the decolonization of legal education in South Africa. It's a work in process, there's a lot to learn, but it's a valid really thing to do. If you look at local contexts that are always ignored, if you look at local values that are always ignored, textbooks being important from other continents, while we've got strong authors on the continent about African jurisprudence and so on. So this is work in progress, and we're looking forward. And I dare say this is also a challenge for other continents. I would assume in Asia, I would assume in Latin America, and it would be great to learn at a forum like this how are the colleagues going about dealing with this important subject. Last night I heard from my colleague here at Pune that in India, for example, only 10% of the population is using the formal legal processes. The million-dollar question would be, if we fix, or we are so intense on teaching, of which is important, teaching how to navigate the formal legal processes, what about the 90%? What are they doing that is so right that we should include in our curriculum for our students? So it's work in progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. So once again, let's thank our 5 panelists for their presentations. Now, before we have to have a break and take a picture and all those things, but before then, we're going to hear from Dr. Patricia O'Sullivan, who's Director of Medical Education at the University of California, San Francisco School of Medicine. Dr. O'Sullivan has been working with the IALS for the past couple of years as we try to develop, try to be more scientific, if you will, about our inquiry into what methods and what the framework should be for evaluation of legal education. And she has been helpful with regard to sharing with us her experiences in medical education, which in the United States is 25 years or more ahead of legal education in terms of reforms. So Dr. O'Sullivan will help us with navigating, how to navigate through our small group discussion to follow soon. So Dr. O'Sullivan, please.
Those presentations, you can see that we have a unique opportunity today because the gentlemen all suggested really great innovations that are happening in their curriculum, or they put challenges in front of us. However, as leaders, and this is very important, these changes are highly driven and motivated by those of you who are in those leadership positions. You really have the opportunity to do the one thing that I know all faculty or academic staff love to do. Evidently, I don't know. Which was, I think that was the technology presentation. The thing that I've discovered is that faculty like to talk. They need the time to really hear what each other has to say and to get their thoughts out and shared and learn from each other. These are typical pictures at my university, where do we do all of our work by bringing faculty groups together in order to share their ideas. And that's what we're going to do in the small breakout groups today, is take the amazing power that's in this audience and the leadership positions here to really think about how to take the ideas that we have and get them implemented in a way that will position us to work to evaluate them. So I want to introduce the logic model. And you can't read that, but you have copies of that in your materials. But I need a show of hands. How many of you have worked with the logic model already? Okay, I'm surprised because it's quite common, and particularly in Africa, uses it quite a lot. So you may see it in some of the places. Well, this is a really interesting, simple approach to think about putting our ideas into columns. And let me just show you what these few columns are. You basically have inputs. Those are what kinds of needs do you have and what kinds of challenges do you have whenever you're going to try an idea out. The next column are the activities. What kinds of things might you be doing? Third is the consequences of these activities. What sort of products do you have? Do I have a new curriculum? Do I have new teaching materials? What do I have? Then, how do I figure out my outcomes? What works better? All of these gentlemen have proposed innovative ideas. You must be asking the logical question, will it work better? And then, what impact does that have on our society, on our institutions? And we've heard some great forecasts here of how these curricula can really change in response to what's happening in our society. So let me walk you through a small example. Many of you completed a survey before you came, talking about the issues that you thought were very important to address during this meeting. 4 of those ideas will form the conversation in the small groups. I've taken one of the ideas that didn't make it to the top, just to demonstrate, well, I think you can use this tool. The logic model is just a tool to move your ideas into action. So I took the idea of this, that the lecture is no longer engaging the students. I suspect there are many of you who realize that that's a problem. So you say, okay, what am I going to do about it? So then I started using this chart to help me think about how I was going to deal with that. So the first thing I thought about, well, is what do I need? One of the things that I need is maybe a literature review on what's really happening in new strategies in the classroom. And no matter what I do, and it's been implied already here, I will need to have faculty or academic staff development because not everybody's going to want to do this. So I'm starting to put my ideas into this column. I also know I'm going to have a challenge, which you already admitted to, which is how do I get the academic staff or faculty to buy in? How do I get them to want to be part of this? And also, how do I engage the learners? In one case, we're seeing that the learners might be engaging us, but similarly, how do I buy or sell this to all of our learners? They all are not equally interested in some of the new ideas that we have. So then what am I going to do? That falls into the next column. What activities could we do if I don't want to focus on the lecture anymore? So maybe I want to use a model that's called team-based learning. That's been very popular in an alternative to lectures. Well, if I want to do team-based learning, what would I do? Well, I need to create some new learning materials.